Chapter 1. My name is Audrey Walsh, and the night my mother told me my wedding fund had been spent on my twin sister, she said it like she was discussing table linens, not stealing the last fair thing I thought I had left. My father sat there in silence. My sister actually sided with her. And in one sentence they made it clear that her future was worth investing in and mine was something they could quietly take from. What they forgot was that I work in private events, and half the luxury wedding they were showing off only existed because vendors trusted my name. So I did not scream, I did not cry, and I did not beg. I walked out, opened my laptop, and before sunrise, the same family who had treated me like I was disposable was calling me in panic, because everything they built on my back was starting to crack. By the time I pulled into my parents' and Oppo's driveway in Franklin, the sky had gone the soft gray color that always made their house look more expensive than it really was. My mother loved that hour. She said it made everything feel polished. The stone front, the perfectly trimmed hedges, the brass lanterns by the door. Even the house itself felt like one more performance she had been rehearsing for years. I sat in my car for a second longer than I needed to, hands still on the steering wheel, watching warm light spill from the dining room windows. I could already picture the table inside. Placemats lined up exactly. Candles lit even though it was only dinner. Water glasses set before anyone sat down, because my mother believed a room should always look ready to be photographed. She had called this a family planning dinner, which in our house usually meant one of two things. Either she needed an audience or she needed something from me. When I walked in, I realized it was both. The dining table looked like a Bride magazine had exploded across it. There were linen swatches, printed mood boards, floral mock-ups, seating charts, a binder thick enough to pass for a legal file, and a stack of glossy photos of the venue my sister had chosen. My mother, Vanessa Walsh, stood at the head of the table in a silk blouse the color of champagne, one manicured hand resting on a page filled with imported peonies and garden roses. "There she is," she said, not because she was glad to see me, but because she was ready to resume. My father, Daniel, gave me a brief nod from his chair. He had that same careful expression he always wore when he wanted credit for being present without having to participate in anything uncomfortable. My sister Sloane was already seated, glowing in that practiced way she had perfected years ago. Not naturally happy. Not exactly. Just arranged for admiration. "You made good time," she said. "I live 40 minutes away," I told her. "Not across the country." My mother waved that off. "Sit down. We were just going over the final upgrades." Upgrades? That word alone told me enough. I work in private event operations. I know the language people use when they are no longer planning a wedding and have quietly started staging a spectacle. The difference is in the details. Nobody says we are spending more than we can afford. They say elevated guest experience. Nobody says we want people talking about this for the wrong reasons if it looks too small. They say visual impact. Nobody says we are terrified of looking ordinary in front of the wrong family. They say the event needs to reflect the moment. I sat down and listened. My mother moved through the binder with the excitement of someone pitching a campaign. The floral installation over the ceremony aisle needed more height. The lighting package at the reception should be upgraded because the standard wash would flatten the photos. She wanted a separate cocktail hour quartet, because silence between spaces felt cheap. The shuttle service for guests from the hotel to the estate needed luxury coaches, not standard charter buses. My sister chimed in about the rehearsal dinner welcome bags, and then casually mentioned their honeymoon in Lake Como as if that part had already become family scripture. My father kept making those vague money noises men like him make when they want to sound in control without saying anything concrete. "We can manage it. There are ways to structure these things. It will work itself out." He never said a number. Not once. That was what made my skin go cold. I know what these things cost. I know what flowers cost in June. I know what custom lighting costs on an outdoor property. I know what transportation contracts look like when the pickup windows stretch late into the evening. And I also knew what my parents earned, what they spent, and how carefully my mother had always lectured me about practicality whenever anything in my life belonged to me. I let them keep talking for another minute. Then I asked the question as evenly as I could. "So what does that leave in the wedding fund?" Everything stopped. My mother did not look up right away. My father reached for his water. Sloane lowered her gaze to her plate, then back to me, annoyed more than startled, like I had interrupted a speech. I waited. My mother finally turned a page in the binder and said nothing. I asked again, more directly this time. What is left of my portion? My father cleared his throat. My mother set the binder down with exaggerated care, the way she did when she wanted the room to understand that I was now the problem. They're really ISN and Apo's. A separate portion anymore, she said. Most of it went towards Sloan and Apo's wedding. She said it so casually that for a second I thought I had misheard her. Like she was telling me it might rain over the weekend. Like the last thing my grandmother had ever tried to protect for me had been spent on centerpieces and coach buses and a honeymoon in Italy. I looked at her and asked the only thing I could. What about the money I put into it? My mother gave the smallest shrug. In this family, we all contribute when something important happens. I could feel my pulse in my throat, not because I was about to cry, because I was trying very hard not to understand too much all at once. So you used Nana and Apo's money and my money for her wedding, and you never planned to tell me. My mother leaned back in her chair. Sloan folded her hands in her lap, watching me the way people watch a scene they think they already know the ending to. My father did not say a word. Then my mother smiled. Sloan is marrying into a world where appearances carry weight, she said. That investment makes sense. You and Reed are doing something smaller, something simple. You do not need the same kind of support. That sentence landed harder than if she had slapped me. Not because of the money. Not only because of the money. Because even now at 32, sitting in the house where I had spent my whole life trying not to need too much, she could still look at me and sort us into categories without a flicker of shame. One daughter worth presenting. One daughter expected to understand. Sloan gave a short laugh under her breath and said, Mom and Apo's. Being blunt, but she ISN and Apo's. Wrong. That was the moment everything inside me went quiet. I had always imagined that if there was ever a breaking point, it would sound loud. A raised voice. A fight. Years of resentment finally tearing through the walls. Instead, what I felt was stillness. A cold kind of clarity. None of them thought there would be consequences. They expected hurt. Maybe tears. Maybe an argument they could twist into evidence that I was difficult, bitter, dramatic. What they did not expect was for me to see the whole structure at once. I stood up. My mother frowned immediately. Do not be ridiculous. My father said we can talk this through later. Sloan rolled her eyes. Are you seriously going to make this whole night about money? I picked up my bag and my keys. My mother called after me, Audrey, stop behaving like a child. I turned then just enough to look at all three of them. My sister with her expensive ring and perfect makeup. My father with his silence dressed up as reason. My mother surrounded by papers and petals and upgrades bought with money that was never hers to move. This isn't an Apo's. About money, I said, and walked out before any of them could pretend not to understand me. The night air hit me hard when I got to my car. I sat there with both hands in my lap, breathing once, then twice, staring at the reflection of their front door in my windshield. I did not cry. My body had gone beyond that. I opened my laptop instead. There were a few things my family had never bothered to learn about me because competence is invisible to people who think it exists for their convenience. They knew I worked with venues and vendors. They knew I was good at what I did. They never asked what that actually meant. They never asked how many favors, how much trust, and how much quiet credibility goes into making expensive people feel secure. I sent 3 short emails and made 2 calls before I started the car. I withdrew my name from any informal support attached to Sloan and Apo's event. I clarified that I was not involved in the wedding in a professional capacity, and that no payment decisions, schedule decisions, or vendor expectations should be tied to me, my role, or my reputation moving forward. I did not tell anyone to cancel anything. I did not threaten anyone. I just removed the layer they had been standing on without ever admitting it was there. Then I drove back to Nashville. My phone started buzzing before I hit the interstate. My mother first. Then Sloan. Then my father. I turned the screen face down and kept driving through the dark. By the time I got home, there were more missed calls than I wanted to count. By dawn there were voicemails too. My mother furious, then frightened. Sloan shrill, then pleading. My father cold enough to make it sound as if I had sabotaged the family out of spite. I sat on the edge of my bed in my apartment with the first light coming through the blinds and listened to none of them all the way through. 4 years I had thought I was simply the daughter they loved less. That night I finally understood something worse. I was the daughter they had built their comfort on, because somewhere along the way everyone in that house had decided I would always be the one who absorbed the cost. Chapter 2. That had not happened in a single night. It had been built in pieces so small that for years I mistook them for family dynamics instead of damage. Sloan and I were born 7 minutes apart in the summer of 1992, and apparently that was long enough for my mother to decide one of us came into the world softer, brighter, more deserving of care. Sloan had the kind of face adults loved immediately. She smiled fast, cried prettily, laughed at the right moments, and knew how to make even bad behavior feel entertaining. I was quieter. I liked knowing what the plan was. I asked follow-up questions. I noticed when rules changed depending on who they applied to. My mother called that intense. My father called it difficult. In our house, those words meant the same thing. Harder to love conveniently. By the time we were teenagers, the pattern was so established that nobody even pretended not to see it. For our 16th birthday, my mother asked Sloan what she wanted first. That should have told me everything. Sloan wanted dinner at a rooftop place downtown with string lights and mocktails, and a guest list long enough to look like a campaign launch. I said I would have been happy with something smaller, just family and maybe 1 or 2 close friends. My mother took that as permission to stop asking what I wanted altogether. The week before the dinner, I found her in the kitchen going over place cards. I said, "Are we doing anything separate for me?" She did not even look up. "Sweetheart, this is for both of you." I looked at the seating chart and said, "Then why are all her friends there?" "Because she actually wants a party," my mother said. "You said you did not care." That was the trick in our house. If I asked for less because I had learned not to expect much, that became proof I did not need anything at all. At the dinner, Sloan got the first toast, the bigger cake, and the spotlight that came with both. My father put an arm around me for a photo and said, "Audrey is just more low maintenance. She is easier." He meant it as praise. He always did. Another year, my high school hosted an awards night for academic scholarship finalists. I had worked for that ceremony like it was a door I could force open with enough effort. My mother promised she would be there. She was supposed to meet me in the lobby before it started. I kept checking the doors until the principal was already calling names. She never came. When I got home that night, I found garment bags hanging from the guest room door and my mother pinning the hem of one of Sloan and Appo's dresses for a show choir banquet. I said, "You missed my ceremony." Without looking up, she said, "Sloan had a fitting emergency." I stood there in a blazer and heels I had picked out carefully for a room she had never entered and asked, "You could not spare an hour?" My father stepped into the hallway then, already loosening his tie. He glanced between us and said, "Your sister gets overwhelmed by this stuff, Audrey. You know that. You are stronger. Do not make everything harder than it needs to be." That sentence followed me for years. You are stronger. Which in our house meant your disappointment is less important because you can carry it without making a scene. By college, I had stopped waiting to be chosen first. I worked weekends, saved aggressively, and bought my own laptop after my sophomore year because I was tired of borrowing old things from cousins and pretending gratitude made them sufficient. I remember setting the box on the kitchen counter one winter break, still feeling proud of myself for managing it alone. My mother looked at it and said, "Good. Now at least Sloan can use it when she needs to." I said, "No, actually she cannot." My mother turned from the sink with a look that suggested I had failed some test of character. "You are really going to be stingy with your own sister?" I almost laughed then. Not because it was funny. Because by that point, I had started to understand that nothing I earned was ever fully mine if it could make Sloan more comfortable. The money worked the same way. Clothes, gas, spending cash, lunches out, little rescue deposits to fix whatever impulsive thing Sloan had done. All of it flowed in her direction under the soft language of need. She needs it more. She is more social. She has different pressures. My father would say things like, "You know how your sister is." My mother would say, "Stop keeping score." What they meant was, the score only counts when it favors her. After a while, I stopped arguing about the small things because the small things were never small enough to be worth the punishment that followed. Silence became a kind of tax I paid to keep the house calm. That is why the wedding fund mattered the way it did. My grandmother Evelyn Hart was the only adult in my life who ever looked at me, and seemed to understand that I was not made of less fragile material just because I carried myself that way. She was methodical, tidy, suspicious of performative generosity, and impossible to charm with theatrics. When Sloane fluttered around her, she smiled. When I sat quietly with her doing crossword puzzles or balancing receipts, she paid attention. Real attention. A few months before I left for college, she took me out to lunch at a diner she loved in Brentwood. We were halfway through grilled cheese and tomato soup when she slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a copy of paperwork for a fund she and my grandfather had helped set up years earlier for Sloane and me. Not huge money, but meaningful money. Enough to matter when the time came to build something of our own. Your parents manage it for now, she said, because you girls were minors when we opened it. But it is for both of you equally. And I want you to remember that. I asked why she was telling me privately. She buttered the corner of her toast and said, because families have ways of turning convenience into principle. I want there to be at least one thing in your life that does not get rewritten around who is louder. I never forgot that sentence. After she died, I held on to it like proof that maybe I was not imagining everything. That maybe there was one place in my life where fairness had been written down and could not be argued away. When I started earning real money, first part-time during school and then during my first years working, I quietly added to that fund. Not because anyone asked me to, because I wanted to believe my future had a foundation that belonged to me too. I did not monitor it obsessively because I trusted the reason it existed. That was my mistake. Not stupidity. Trust. There is a difference, and people from families like mine spend years confusing one for the other. Around the same time, I was building the part of my life that had nothing to do with them. I got through school on scholarships, campus jobs, internships, and the kind of discipline people call admirable when they benefit from it and rigid when they do not. I found my way into private event operations because I was good at two things most people hate: logistics and pressure. I could look at a contract and see where a problem would happen before it happened. I could listen to a vendor and know when they were selling confidence instead of certainty. I could walk into a timeline disaster and start fixing it without needing credit. That kind of competence earns you trust in the event world, but only after you have spent years solving problems nobody else wants to touch. I did that gladly. There is something clean about work when the rules are honest. If a deal is bad, the language will tell you. If a venue is bluffing, the schedule will expose it. Work made more sense to me than family ever had. I met Reed Mercer on a property walkthrough outside Nashville after a spring storm knocked out power during a rehearsal setup. The bride and Oppo's mother was on the verge of tears, the caterer was swearing under his breath, and 3 separate people were trying to fix the same issue while making it worse. Reed was there because his firm had consulted on the restoration of the property the year before. While everyone else was spinning, he stood in a dark hallway with a flashlight and the calm expression of a man who did not need chaos to prove he was important. I snapped at someone about extension cords and he glanced over and said, "You look like the only person here who knows what is actually happening." I said, "That is because I am." He nodded once and said, "Good. Tell me where to stand." That was the first thing I liked about him. He did not perform helpfulness. He just helped. Later, when the power came back and I was trying to salvage a seating chart that had gotten wet at the edges, he handed me a clean clipboard and said, "You ever think maybe your job is just managing other people and Oppo's bad decisions in formal wear?" I laughed harder than I should have, mostly because he was right. We started slowly after that. Coffee, site visits, late dinners after events. He listened carefully. He asked direct questions. He never treated my steadiness like a lack of feeling. Being with him felt like stepping into a room where I did not have to earn oxygen. Then Sloane got engaged. It happened the way everything in her life happened, with timing designed for maximum audience. A ring in a restaurant courtyard, photos from 3 angles, a caption about forever posted before dessert arrived. His name was Grant Holloway. He was a corporate attorney from a family my mother had been orbiting socially for years through charity events, club dinners, and those carefully strategic friendships women like her pretend are organic. The minute she said Holloway, my mother and Oppo's whole body changed. You could see the future rearrange itself in her face. Not Sloane and Oppo's future. Hers. From that point on, every conversation turned into planning. Venue options. Garden estates. Guest count. Menu tastings. Whether the ceremony should feel understated luxury or full statement elegance. My phone started lighting up with questions that sounded casual and were never casual. Do you know a florist who can do installations that look expensive without being tacky? Can you look at this contract really fast? What does a lighting upgrade usually cost? Is this transportation quote normal? Which linen company do your best venues use? Nobody asked how I was. They asked what I knew. At the time I still thought that was survivable. I still thought favoritism was the wound and usefulness was just the coping mechanism. I had not yet understood the more dangerous truth. They were not only planning to give my sister the wedding they believed matched her value. They were already building it on mine. Chapter 3. I understood the full shape of that the next morning. When I finally turned my phone back on and let their panic come through. My screen lit up so fast it almost looked like it had glitched. Missed calls from my mother. Missed calls from Sloan. 2 clipped texts from my father, both written in that cold stripped-down tone he used when he wanted to sound like the only adult in the room. Your behavior last night was unacceptable. Call your mother immediately. I sat at my kitchen counter in Nashville with a mug of coffee I had not touched and started listening to the voicemails in order. My mother and Appo's voice came first, sharp and breathless. Audrey, call me back right now. Whatever stunt you think you and Appo's re-pulling, stop it. The next one came 20 minutes later, same voice, different temperature. Monica and Appo's office called. The estate says they need updated confirmation on the payment schedule. What did you say to them? Then Sloan. What is wrong with you? Pause and then louder. Are you actually trying to ruin my wedding because you cannot stand that mine matters more? By the 4th voicemail, her anger had started to crack around the edges. Audrey, seriously, call me. Hair and makeup is asking questions now and mom is freaking out. I played the last one from my mother twice. Please call me back. We can talk about the money later. Do not do something you cannot take back. That was the moment I knew exactly how dependent they had been on my silence. Not because the wedding was falling apart in some dramatic movie way. Because the invisible layer they had been using without permission had suddenly disappeared. And now everyone who had extended them grace wanted to know why. The truth was simple. I had not made one giant move. I had removed 100 small assumptions. When families like mine use you, they almost never do it in one obvious theft. They do it by inches. One forwarded email. One introduction. One casual mention of your job to make strangers feel safe. One moment where you are too tired to argue, and your silence becomes consent in everyone else and Appo's mind. Monica Hale, the events director at Ashby House, had agreed to hold Sloan and Appo's date longer than normal because I had personally vouched that my family would not waste her time. A floral designer I knew through an old vendor network had quietly trimmed her design fee because my name was attached to the referral. The shuttle company had accepted a softer payment structure because they assumed someone in the industry was keeping the whole thing from drifting into chaos. Even the beauty coordinator had taken Sloan and Appo's wedding weekend after initially being booked because she thought a planner-level operations person was linked to the family. The problem was that I had never formally offered any of that. My mother had a way of turning access into entitlement so smoothly that even I had missed the line while it was happening. She would call and say something like, I only need your opinion on this contract, then mention my name in an email thread as though I were loosely overseeing the event. Sloan would say at tastings, my sister does luxury events so we are covered on the logistics side. My father, whenever he wanted to inflate our standing in a room, would tell people Audrey handles major events in Nashville. She knows these people. As if relationships built over years of long weekends, impossible clients, and disasters handled quietly belonged to the family by inheritance. I called my office before I called anyone at home. My direct supervisor, Claire Bennett, answered on the second ring. Hey, you are up early. I need to document something, I said. Family wedding situation. My name may have been used more broadly than I realized. I sent notices last night withdrawing any personal or professional association. Claire went quiet in that focused way she always did when something shifted from gossip to risk. Did you sign anything? No. Did you represent the company in writing? Not officially. But I opened a few doors and I think my family let people assume more than they should have. She exhaled once. Then you did the right thing by cutting it off. Send me a summary for file. If any vendor tries to tie Elm Street events to their balances or timelines, We need clean distance immediately. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. She did not waste time performing sympathy when clarity would protect you faster. I should have caught it sooner, I said. No, she replied. You should have had a family that did not use your professional credibility like a coupon code. I laughed once, a short dry sound that did not feel much like laughter. Fair. Audrey, listen to me. Ambiguity is how messes become your mess. End the ambiguity. I already started. Good. Finish it. After that, Monica called. Her tone was not warm and it was not hostile. It was the voice of a woman who ran a historic property for a living and had no interest in being dragged into domestic dysfunction. Audrey, I received your email. Thank you for confirming. I want to be clear, she said. We are not canceling anything. We are simply reverting to the original protections required for a client without external operational support. Of course she was. That was exactly what a competent person would do. I understand. There are outstanding timing issues on transportation and floral installation load in. If your family resolves them, the event proceeds. If not, certain elements will be scaled or delayed. I just want to make sure there is no confusion about your role. There is no confusion on my end anymore, I said. She was quiet for a beat. I figured there probably was before. That landed harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, because it was accurate. By noon, the calls from home had shifted in tone. My mother stopped demanding and started bargaining. Sloan stopped accusing and started spiraling. My father held the line the longest, still speaking to me like a disobedient employee instead of a daughter. He finally called instead of texting. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. What? A simple conversation should not require this level of drama, he said. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the parking lot behind my building. A simple conversation would have been telling me you emptied my fund before you spent it. This is your sister and Appo's wedding. It was my money. It is family money. No, I said sharper now. It was managed by family. That is not the same thing. He went quiet. Then, in the same measured tone, he said, if this wedding is damaged because vendors start pulling back, that will be on you. That sentence should have hurt me. Instead, it clarified everything. No, I said. If it gets damaged, it will be because you built it on promises you could not cover without using me. He hung up. Sloan called less than 5 minutes later. I almost did not answer, but part of me wanted to hear what fear sounded like in her voice. She skipped hello. What did Monica say to you? I am not discussing your contracts with you. Oh my God, Audrey, stop talking like a lawyer. This is my wedding. And that made it okay to use my part of the fund. That is not what this is about. I stood up and crossed to the sink. More to move than because I needed anything. Then tell me what it is about. It is about you always doing this, she snapped. You act like everything is a moral test. You cannot just be happy for me. I waited. Then she said the part she had been circling. Can you just fix it? Tell them there was a misunderstanding. There it was. Not remorse. Not accountability. Convenience. I closed my eyes for a second. No. You are being cruel. No, I said quietly. I am being unavailable. She made a sound halfway between a scoff and a choked laugh. You are really going to burn your whole family over this. That almost got me. Not because I believed her. Because for most of my life I would have. After I hung up, I called Luke. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting. The fund. My mother and Appo's face. My father and Appo's silence. Sloan clapping like humiliation was part of the entertainment. When I finished, he asked only one question. Did you lie to anyone? No. Did you touch a contract that belonged to them after pulling your name? No. Then this is not sabotage, he said. This is them meeting the real cost of their own choices. I sat down at my kitchen table again, suddenly exhausted. I keep waiting to feel guilty. That makes sense. But I do not. Not really. What do you feel? I thought about it. About the calls, the threats, the panic, the old instinct to rush in and restore order just so the room would stop shaking. Relief, I said finally. Which feels horrible. No, he said. Feels unfamiliar. That was exactly it. My whole life, I had been trained to believe that refusing to carry people who hurt me was a character flaw. That saying no was meaner than using me. That withholding help was more shameful than being treated like I existed to provide it. But sitting there in the quiet with my phone face down and my inbox full of confirmation emails, none of that felt true anymore. For the first time in my life, I was not standing in the place my family had assigned me. And the strangest part was that once I stepped out of it, I could finally see how much of their stability had never belonged to them at all. Chapter 4. They kept the wedding alive. That was what made it worse and in a strange way more honest. If everything had collapsed overnight, people could have blamed one dramatic rupture, one bad decision, one vindictive daughter who refused to play nice. But that was not what happened. What happened was slower, more revealing. The machine kept moving, only now every part of it groaned loud enough for people to hear. A week after I pulled my name from everything, my cousin Dana called me while I was leaving the office. "You heard they are still going through with it, right?" I got into my car and shut the door. I assumed they would. She made a soft sound into the phone, something between a laugh and disbelief. "Your mother would sell the roof over her head before she let people know she lost control of a wedding." I looked out through the windshield at the parking garage wall and said nothing. Dana lowered her voice. "From what I heard, your dad moved money fast. Too fast. And your mom asked Aunt Cheryl for a loan, which I know she would rather die than admit. That fit too easily. I could see the whole thing without being there. My mother tightening her jaw and calling it temporary. My father saying it was only a liquidity issue, as if renaming panic made it respectable. Sloan insisting certain things simply could not be changed because people would notice. And people like my family always believed the same thing. That debt hurts less if the photos look expensive. The wedding happened 3 Saturdays later at Ashby House, a white-columned estate outside Franklin that had become wildly popular with people who wanted old Southern money aesthetics without actually belonging to old Southern money. I did not go. Reed offered to stay home with me, but I told him not to. There was no reason for both of us to sit inside my apartment holding our breath over a room full of people who had never once done that for me. Instead, I spent the afternoon reorganizing a vendor file for work and pretending my phone was not on the counter in plain sight. Dana texted first. "Guess already asking where you are." Then 10 minutes later. "Your mom told one table you had a last-minute event emergency." Few minutes after that. "She told somebody else you came down with the flu." I stared at the messages, then set the phone face down. By early evening, more came in. One of the shuttle drivers got held at the side entrance over a payment issue. Someone heard your dad arguing with a man in a navy suit near the catering tent. Your sister looks beautiful. Your mother looks like she has not blinked in 6 hours. It should not have given me satisfaction, and maybe satisfaction is not even the right word. What I felt was confirmation. Not joy. Not revenge in the cartoon sense. Just confirmation that without me quietly absorbing all the weak points, the whole illusion had started showing its seams. The text that stayed with me came later that night. "People are whispering because a twin sister missing from a wedding is weird enough. Your mother keeps changing the story." I sat on my couch with my shoes still on and read that one 3 times. My absence had become visible, not because I had staged it to be, but because they had built too much of their image around the assumption that I would always remain inside the frame, even if only as background. The photos went up the next morning anyway. Sloan on the front steps in silk and lace, chin lifted, bouquet angled perfectly. Grant beside her in a tuxedo that looked more expensive than warm. My mother smiling the way women smile when they think survival counts as triumph. My father looking older than he had the month before. If you did not know what had happened behind the scenes, you would have thought it was flawless. That was the thing about my family. They were never best at building. They were best at editing. For a few weeks after the wedding, everything went quiet in the deceptive way things do before they start unraveling in public. My mother stopped calling. Sloan stopped alternating between rage and self-pity. My father disappeared into the kind of silence men like him use when they are trying to outweigh consequences. But quiet is not repair. It is only delay. I started seeing the first signs in little places. My mother and Appo's boutique, which she had always spoken about as if it were a private jewel box for the right kind of woman, began running sales that did not fit her usual style. Seasonal refresh. Inventory reset. Client appreciation event. The language changed, but desperation has a shape, and I knew it when I saw it. Then Dana called again. "I went by your mom and Appo's store today, and half the spring line had red stickers on it." I leaned against my kitchen counter. She said she was making room. Dana snorted. Vanessa does not make room. Vanessa performs abundance. If she is marking down half her floor, she is bleeding. That image stayed with me. My mother, who had spent years lecturing me about quality and standards and how certain things should never look discounted, now folding scarcity into branding because she had no other choice. My father took longer to crack, but when he did, it was subtler and meaner. He worked in wealth management, and men in his business live on confidence as much as numbers. You do not need a scandal to damage someone like that. You just need enough people to suspect he is not as solid as he pretends. A former client of his spotted me at a charity luncheon 2 months later and said, almost too casually, "Your dad doing all right?" I have not seen him around much. I smiled and said I had been busy and left it at that. But the question itself told me what I needed to know. People were noticing his absence, which meant they had already noticed something else first. Around the same time, Sloan and Appo's marriage began to show the kind of wear that expensive photographs never capture. At first it came through social media the way so many modern disappointments do. Less couple content. More vague captions about peace, alignment, misunderstood hearts, protecting your energy. The language of someone trying to sound evolved while quietly coming apart. Then Dana told me Sloan had been seen crying in the ladies' room at a restaurant in Green Hills while Grant paid the bill and took a work call outside. I should have felt cruel listening to it. I did not. I felt sad in the detached way you feel when a prediction you never wanted to make turns out to be correct. Grant was not a monster. That would have made things simpler. He was polished, controlled, and trained from birth to move through rooms where everything was expensive and nothing was spontaneous. Sloan had mistaken his attention for intimacy because she had spent her whole life confusing admiration with care. My mother had done the same thing. The real call came on a Thursday afternoon in August. I almost did not answer because the number was blocked, but something in me already knew. Sloan. There was a pause, then a long exhale. Wow, so you do still recognize my voice. I closed the spreadsheet open on my laptop. What do you want? For a second she sounded almost normal. Tired, if anything. I just wanted to talk. No, you didn't. In Appo's silence. Then quieter, she said, things have been hard. I did not help her fill the space. Grant is never home, she said. And when he is irritated. His mother treats me like I am decorative. Everything feels like a test, and nobody will tell me the rules. I stared out the window over my sink, watching the late summer light flatten against the building across from mine. I am sorry you are unhappy. She let that sit for a moment, maybe hoping sympathy would open a door I used to keep unlocked for her. Then she took the turn I had been waiting for. Mom and Appo's store needs help. She is trying to put together some kind of charity partnership for the fall, something high-end, and I thought maybe you knew somebody. Or maybe Reed knows investors, I do not know, somebody who could at least point us in the right direction. There it was. Not remorse. Not reckoning. Need. I said nothing. She rushed on. I am not asking for money. I know, I said. You are asking for access. Her tone sharpened instantly. So that is it. You are really enjoying this. No. Come on, Audrey. I stood up and walked away from the window because suddenly the room felt too small. I do not need this to happen to you to know who I am. Then why are you acting like this? Because I finally understand that every time things fall apart for you, your first instinct is still to look around for something of mine to stand on. She inhaled sharply. You always think you are better than everyone. No, I said. I just stopped agreeing to be useful on command. She hung up on me. Afterward I stayed where I was, phone still in my hand, listening to the silence return. It did not feel triumphant. If anything, it felt sadder than anger. Sloan was hurting, yes. But even inside her own unhappiness, she still saw me the same way she always had. Not as a sister she had wronged. Not as a person whose trust she had broken. As a structure she hoped was still standing. That was the difference between us. She had spent her life being carried and never learned the weight of her own choices. I had spent mine carrying too much, and once I put it down, I learned exactly how strong I had been all along. Chapter 5. What strength really changes is not your ability to endure. It is your willingness to stop calling endurance love. By early October, the collapse had become too visible to hide with better lighting and polite lies. Dana called me one Tuesday afternoon while I was leaving a tasting downtown. They are listing the house, she said. I stopped at the crosswalk outside the hotel and turned away from the traffic. Are you sure? I know the realtor, she said. Your mother is telling people they want to downsize and simplify. Which is rich because Vanessa would rather be buried in that dining room than simplify anything. I looked across the street at a florist loading white hydrangeas into a van and felt something low and tired move through me. Not triumph. Not pity exactly. Just the ache of watching people destroy themselves rather than admit what they had done while there was still time to repair it. A few days later, a letter arrived at my office. Not my apartment. Not my mailbox. My office. That alone told me my mother was still trying to reach me through the part of my life she thought looked most respectable from the outside. The envelope was heavy cream stationery, my full name written in the careful script she used when she wanted something to appear thoughtful before it had actually earned the word. I opened it at my desk, then wished I had not because it was exactly what I expected. She wrote that families make mistakes. She wrote that wedding stress had escalated emotions. She wrote that Sloane was going through a difficult adjustment and that sisters should not stay divided forever. She wrote that pain had been felt on all sides. She did not write that they had emptied my fund. She did not write that she had looked me in the face and told me my future required less investment because I was not entering the right world. She did not write that my father had sat there and let it happen. It was the same old family language, polished until accountability disappeared under the shine. I folded the letter once, then again, and slid it into my bag. That night Reed found me at the kitchen table with it lying open beside a spreadsheet of final guest counts for our wedding. He read my face before he read a word. Your mother. I nodded. He asked if I wanted him to read it. I said yes. By the time he finished, his mouth had gone flat in the way it did when he was angry enough to become very quiet. This is not an apology, he said. No. This is an invitation to resume your assigned role. I leaned back in my chair and pressed my fingers to my temple. I know. He set the letter down and looked at me carefully. Are you thinking about inviting them? I did not answer right away, because that was the humiliation I had not admitted even to myself yet. Not that I missed them. Not that I wanted them there. Just that I knew exactly what people notice at weddings in America. Who walks the bride down the aisle? Whether her parents are in the front row. Whether the photographs tell a neat story. There is a pressure in that even when you know better. Maybe I said finally. I do not know. Part of me keeps thinking maybe I should give them the chance to show up right for once. Reed sat across from me and waited until I met his eyes. If they come, will you feel more peaceful, or will you spend the whole day making room for whatever breaks when they do? That question settled everything faster than a long conversation could have. Because he was right. In my family, my presence had never simply been my presence. It had always been labor. Emotional labor. Social labor. Damage control. Translation. Support. Buffer. If they were there, some part of me would still be scanning the room trying to keep everyone stable. And I was done building my life around other people and Appo's instability. The video call came 2 weeks later from a number I did not know. I almost declined it. Then I answered. For a second nobody spoke. The camera angle was bad, too low and too close. That alone told me they were not in the old house. There was none of my mother and Appo's curated softness in the background. No polished wood table. No framed mirrors catching the right light. Just an unfamiliar beige wall, a lamp that looked rented, and the exhausted faces of the 3 people who had once filled an entire house with the certainty that I would always come back. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. My father looked as if sleep had stopped visiting him. Sloane sat off to one side on the edge of a couch, her hair pulled back, face bare. None of the glossy self-possession she used to wear like armor. My mother was the first to speak. Audrey, she said, and then her voice broke. I waited. We made terrible mistakes, she said. I said nothing. She kept going, words falling over one another now. They had lost the house. Sloane and Grant were separated and lawyers were involved. Things were complicated, painful, humiliating. My father and Appo's work was no longer where it had been. Nothing was easy anymore. Then she said it. We were wrong. I looked at her and felt how empty that sentence could be when it arrived without shape. Wrong about what? She closed her eyes for a moment. My father lowered his head. Sloan stared at a spot somewhere below the screen. My mother inhaled slowly and tried again. Wrong about you. Wrong about your worth. Wrong about the way we treated you. Wrong about believing appearances mattered more than fairness. Still not enough. So I asked again, quieter this time. What did you do? That was the question that finally cornered the truth. My mother said they took what had been mine because they thought I would endure it. She admitted they had used the fund because they believed Sloan and Appo's wedding would bring more value back to the family than mine ever could. She admitted she had treated me like the dependable child who would absorb the cost of everyone else and Appo's choices. My father spoke next. His voice sounded older than I had ever heard it. I knew it was wrong, he said. Maybe not every detail at first, but enough. I kept telling myself I was keeping peace. All I was really doing was protecting the wrong daughter from consequences and asking the right one to pay for it. Hearing that did not heal anything. If anything, it made the loss feel cleaner and sadder. Truth arriving that late has a way of sounding less like redemption and more like an invoice. Sloan still had not looked at me. When she finally did, it was brief. I did not think you would really leave us with it, she said. Not an apology. Not quite. But closer to honesty than she had ever come. You mean you thought I would clean it up, I said. She looked away again. My mother started crying in earnest then. Not elegantly. Not publicly. Just the ugly, tired crying of a woman who had run out of better costumes. Can we start over, she asked. Please. Can we come to the wedding? Can we try to heal this? There it was. The real request. Not forgiveness as principle. Access as comfort. A way back inside the life I had built without them so that my stability could soften the consequences waiting on their side of the door. I looked at all three of them and felt something much sharper than anger. Clarity. I told them Reed and I were getting married in 3 weeks by the lake, with a small guest list and people who had never once asked me to trade dignity for family peace. I told them I hoped genuinely that they learned how to love people before needing something from them. I told Sloan that being favored is not the same as being cherished, and that a life built around being chosen by the room leaves you very weak when the room goes dark. Then I said the thing that mattered most. I am not coming back to hold this together for you. My mother whispered my name. My father shut his eyes. Sloan opened her mouth as if she might argue, then seemed too tired to manufacture a defense. I ended the call before they could ask again. 3 weeks later, I married Reed beside a quiet lake outside Hendersonville under warm string lights, and a sky that looked honest from every angle. His mother brought coffee for half the bridal party before anyone asked. His brother carried folding chairs without acting like he deserved applause for it. Nobody performed generosity. Nobody needed an audience to be kind. When it was time to walk forward, there was no ache in me about who was missing. There was only the strange, steady feeling of finally standing in a life that had not been arranged around someone else and Appo's need to be admired. I did not think about the money that had been taken from me. I did not think about my mother and Appo's face at the table or the house they lost or the marriage that cracked under the weight of its own emptiness. I thought about what they had failed to ruin. My judgment. My peace. My ability to love without humiliating someone first. My right to decide who gets access to my life and who does not. That was the part they never planned for. They thought the worst thing they could do was hurt me. They never imagined I might learn from it. Some apologies arrive too late to sound like truth. Sometimes they sound more like fear of being left alone with the consequences. I would love to know what you think. When family finally says they were wrong, is that enough to open the door again? Or are there some doors that only close when we finally start respecting ourselves?